Hi everybody, Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, and today's contract tip has to do with getting a copy of the earnest money. Why do you need one? Do you need one? What's the purpose? Things that make you go, Stay tuned to the end and I will tell you what you actually need instead. So, you do not need a copy of the earnest money. Now, that being said, your broker might have a policy that they require you to get a copy of the earnest money, but that does no good for anything. So, let's think about this. What is it that you are looking for, and why do even brokers require a copy of the earnest money? Well, what you're actually trying to determine on behalf of your broker and of your client, whether it's your buyer client or the seller client, is did the buyer turn in the earnest money, and did the holder deposit the earnest money? So why do we ask for a copy of the earnest money? Because if you think about it, anybody can write a check payable to whomever the holder is for thousands and thousands of dollars, pull out their cell phone, pull out their handy dandy cell phone, take a picture of it and send a picture. Okay, I've got a copy of the earnest money. What does that actually mean? It doesn't mean anything. It means there's a check written with somebody's name on it for thousands of dollars, and there's a picture of it. It has nothing to do with, did the buyer actually send the earnest money to the holder? Did the holder deposit it? Or if the holder made the deposit, is the money good? Are they good funds? So forth and so on. It doesn't mean anything. So why do brokers ask for copies of this? Well, I'll tell you why. I don't remember exactly when, but 15 to 20 years ago, it's been within the time I've been practicing, and I've been practicing for over 27 years. So sometime within that time, as you know, the contracts change. The Georgia Association of Realtors contract, or the GAR contract, changes every year. And before it used to change every year, it still changed pretty frequently. Well, one of the provisions in the GAR contract that has been added on was this whole section about the remittance or the sending of earnest money from the buyer to the holder. So what did it used to say? It used to have definitely the amount of the earnest money and who the holder was. But there were no options for, in today's contract, it says in the GAR contract and in the RE forms contract, it says buyer, as of the date of this offer, the holder is in possession of the earnest money. Or it says buyer to remit earnest money within X number of days of the binding agreement date. So the only provision in the contract, as I said, was the amount of the earnest money and who the holder was. When you, as a real estate agent, worked with a buyer, you met with your buyer and they wrote a check for the earnest money to the broker who was the holder of the earnest money. So you, as the real estate agent, were in possession of that check when you wrote the offer. And then per license law, you turned in the earnest money to your broker as soon after receipt as practically possible. As you know from license law, you turn that in to your broker. So a copy of the check did imply that it was in the broker holder's possession, and then the broker holder had the obligation to make the deposit. Now, there's still the provision if the funds weren't good, the holder had to send notice and so forth and so on. But before the contracts changed for this section where the buyer and seller negotiate the time frame within which the buyer is going to send the funds to the holder, there wasn't that option. The only way to have earnest money in a contract was the buyer wrote the check at the time they wrote the offer, handed it to the agent. The agent was then obligated per license law to turn it into the broker, who then was obligated per license law to make the deposit. Therefore, a copy of a check did mean that you as the agent were in possession of the funds, which meant your broker was going to be in possession of the funds and make the deposit. That's why brokers still don't necessarily think through why they need a copy of it. That's why we used to ask for a copy of it. But what is it that you really need? What is it to give your broker and your client that comfort level that that buyer is in earnest to buy the property? Well, did they actually send it and was it deposited? So you agents, think through this a little bit. What is it that you really need? You really need proof of deposit, not a copy of the actual check that was written, whether that be a personal check, a bank check, a certified check, a money order, so forth and so on. What you should be requesting from your own broker, if that's the holder, or from the co-op broker, or from the closing attorney, if you are having the closing attorney as the holder of the earnest money, is you want proof of deposit. You want that deposit slip. So that's what y'all should be requesting, is proof of deposit, the deposit slip from the holder. Now, it is still the holder's responsibility if those funds are not honored by the bank for whatever reason. It is still the holder's responsibility to send notice to the parties that those funds were not honored. But as an agent with respect to the contract, request proof of deposit. And I will also tell you, as a real estate agent, regardless of the side of the deal you're on, if you're on the buyer side or the seller side, it is still your responsibility to follow up with the earnest money, because nothing's an issue until it's an issue. But if it is, everybody has a potential claim to the earnest money. The buyers want the earnest money back if the seller defaults or if they terminate. The seller is going to want the earnest money if the buyer defaults. They're going to want that for liquidated damages. And they want to know, in the meantime, the seller wants to know, and you as the agent, don't waste your time if a buyer is not in earnest and in good faith pursuing this contract by failing to even send in the earnest money. So you real estate agents on buyer side and on seller side, y'all need to follow up with the holder of the earnest money, whomever it is, and ask them, did they receive it? Did they deposit it? Did they receive it? Did they deposit it? If they deposited it, get proof of deposit. And that is what you can show your own broker as well as your own client. Now, I am going to do another video on what happens if earnest money has been sent, has been deposited, and then the buyer terminates the deal. What happens to transfer that earnest money? Can you transfer it from one terminated deal to a new contract? Stay tuned for another video on that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education. Bye. If you like that video, check out the one here. If you like the content on this entire channel, please click here to subscribe. I try to take even the most complicated of real estate situations and make them crystal clear. See what I did there? Real estate made crystal clear. Thank you guys so much for watching.